Before leaving the Republic of South Africa, I stopped and asked advice from an old man sitting on a bench. He was non responsive. The visit to Europe was an eye opening experience. It is extremely old in terms of its architecture and infrastructure, but with a modern twist.
Nu wel. Heel veel mensen doen al te vroeg. Ja, nee, goed. Dankjewel, hè. Ja, dankjewel. Doei. Mijn broer.
There was Wi-Fi everywhere, on the buses, in the streets, on the trains, in the hotels, in restaurants. Everywhere you went, you had Wi-Fi connectivity, and it was free. No Vodacom, no Cell C, no MTN, nothing, just free. Wi-Fi service. Another thing I found very interesting was how people embraced the diverse culture through historical buildings and monuments, art galleries, and so forth. I did see a number of protests. In fact, one of the more interesting protests I saw was where a pro Israeli protest was going on right opposite a pro Palestinian protest. And it was done in a very orderly fashion. There was no shouting, there was no screaming. People were just voicing their opinions. Very interesting.
And the sports movement, or the history of the sports struggle, anti-apartheid sports struggle, actually reveals how much deception has taken place in South Africa and within the community outside. So people often ask me, why sport? What has sport got to do with politics and so on? But if you think about it, sport only becomes interesting when you look at it within the framework of society.
I visited a number of cities where South African cities, specifically East London, where I am from, have twinning agreements. I visited the Lower Saxony region, where East London has a number of twinning agreements, as well as the city of Leiden in the Netherlands, where East London has a twinning agreement. And I found absolutely no links between the two. It's just chalk and cheese. What East London is learning from these cities is beyond me. I think it's just a way of councillors having a nice overseas holiday at the expense of taxpayers, because there are services that we are handed by our democratic government that people in Europe would just not accept at all. I mean, we are probably, in terms of where we are in terms of services and life expectancy and general living standards, we are probably edging 18th, 19th century Europe in general now. And so I don't see where the links are. Here we are still in Leiden, and as you can see behind me, this is Leiden's answer to Buffalo Street. And as you can see, there's very little difference between Leiden's Buffalo Street and Buffalo City's Buffalo Street. Amandla. I hope to return one day, but for now, probably for the next 2 years, I'll be paying for this visit because it is quite expensive. Our currency is only good enough to keep our ANC politicians in the lap of luxury, and our politicians generally. But it's not good for, leading a very good lifestyle or leading a very good lifestyle. We don't have living wages. We have survival wages in South Africa. But I really do hope to return one day, probably if I am allowed to have a pension by the time I go on pension. But I do recommend to the youngsters that they travel and experience these other cultures. It's very difficult to make a judgment based on one visit, but just my observations from the time I spent there was it was absolutely amazing, and I hope to return one day.